Did President Joe Biden lie just to get himself into the White House? Hello, my name is Nissy Tee and welcome to Watchman News, breaking the breaking news. Now imagine being a child and growing up with the sounds of gunfire and bombings. Imagine being 11 years old and being forced to marry a 24-year-old man. Imagine being forced to be in the Islamic State, an extremist Islamic group who then allegedly returned to shoot you 4 times in the stomach and 4 times in the leg. Well, while you sit and imagine, this is the harsh reality of a now 17-year-old girl whose name has been kept secret in order to guard her safety, who has to actually live with this. It has been 10 years since the war in Syria began, a war that has since claimed the lives of hundreds and thousands of people and turned the country into an unrecognizable version of its former self. A war that has been backed by Russia, Iran, the US, and its allies, including Turkey, all of whom have shown support for differing competing groups. Now, though there is currently a ceasefire in place, it doesn't seem like it's anything solid, as at any moment it's been said that conflict could resurge. Syria is a place that we heard about in mainstream media for so long, until we just completely forgot about it. But it's a place where people are still suffering till this day. It is known as one of the most violent and bloody conflicts of the 21st century, and it looks like there may be a dreaded resurgence after all. This young lady recalls how her elder sibling first began showing signs of loyalty to ICE, with her mother quickly turning too. As a result of her mother's radicalization, the young lady, who at the time was just an 11-year-old girl, was offered to the 24-year-old man who also was a member of ICE and served as a judge in one of the terror group's religious courts in 2015. The young man was later killed just 3 months after they were married. The young woman recalls how she too was then forced to join ICE, but made it very clear that she kept resisting. After ICE was allegedly defeated in early 2019, she and her mother ended up like so many other women and children in Syria, in a camp with no sense of security or any idea of what will happen to them next. It is this very holding camp that the young woman recalls being asleep with her friends in their tent and a group of men coming in and opening fire on them, leaving her with 4 bullets in her stomach and 4 in her leg. When asked about who attacked them, it was clear that she was convinced that it was indeed ICE, with her exact words being, "No one else could do this other than ICE. My mother once threatened me and told me that she would send them to shoot me and that they would be wearing masks. Just like my mum said, the Islamic State shot me." Now, there is no evidence to show that it was indeed her mother who sent them to try and kill her, but it does seem that this young lady has her mind made up, stating that her mother doesn't want anything to do with her, and neither does she. It is being reported that there has been a rise in this ICE ideology in these camps, which is indeed a scary thought. The war in Syria has been going on for so long now, and to think that there may be another generation being indoctrinated and radicalized who would then continue on the bloodshed is a thought I'm sure no human being would like to think or would wish over any nation. I spoke just last week about the things happening around the world and the responsibility that we have as those who live in nations where we have far more choices than many. Let this girl's story be a reminder that we really don't have time to cower and live in fear. There are people quite literally dying, and until we can stop spending so much time being limited by fear and being restricted by these anxieties, real change can never be actualized. Tanzania made history last week as the first female president, Samia Suluhu Hassan, was sworn in. Now, while many celebrated this new turn in history, many have been quite apprehensive, as this only comes as a result of the sudden death of former President John MAGU-FULI, a death which many people, especially across social media, have claimed was an assassination. While the Western media portrayed him as controversial, it was clear that many Africans across the globe saw him as a hero. He was well known as the bulldozer, as he made it very clear that he was against corruption, stating in a press conference that corruption is a cancer, it is indeed a disease. He was known as being a COVID skeptic. If you remember, at the beginning of COVID, I even spoke about it right here on Watchman News, stating that the Tanzanian president had tested a pawpaw and a goat. Now, if you remember, a pawpaw is, of course, a fruit, testing both for COVID, of which both tests came back positive, revealing that there may be some foul play around this disease that has since claimed the lives of millions across the globe. He was known for his willingness to push back against Western influence in his country, and though stating that he indeed wanted to maintain democracy, he did make it very clear that he and his administration were doing this in accordance to their constitution, but also in accordance to their tradition. In 2020, he was then re-elected for a second term, winning by a landslide of 84% of votes, an outcome of which the opposition claimed was, of course, rigged. Now, I mean, at this point, are we even surprised? Everyone and their mother is claiming that elections are rigged when they don't go their way, which, if we're really honest, most are. But hey, what on earth do I know? I shall digress. President MAGU-FULI would have been expected to complete his term until 2025, but ex-Vice President Hassan has stepped in as the president in the interim until the next elections, giving her the title as the first female president of Tanzania. It is said that President MAGU-FULI died of a cardiac arrest, with rumors that it may have been COVID-related after he disappeared from the public eye for roughly 3 weeks before his passing. Again, circumstances that very few people seem to believe. Many have called it an assassination and an attempt to shut down the works of a man who in essence had a Tanzania-first outlook on things. There is set to be a period of grieving for 21 days in the country for a man whose legacy is now left in the hands of incumbent President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Now, I have spoken on here on numerous occasions about African leaders and the need for them to prioritize the African continent. For many years, the issues and trials that we have seen across Africa has been a result of corruption, poor handling of finances, and the leading figureheads' outright disregard for the people they are supposed to be serving. So to think that a man who came to disrupt the status quo that has for too long held a grip around the throat of so many African nations may have been killed wrongfully is not necessarily too far-fetched. But as always, I am always interested in what you have to say. So please do make sure you leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Do you believe that President MAGU-FULI was assassinated in an attempt to keep corruption going? Or perhaps his skepticism of COVID is what has led to his demise? Leave a comment below. As you know, I'll definitely be reading. In the lead up to the elections, one of the biggest conflicts and probably the most polarizing topics between Biden and Trump was probably their views on immigration and the US-Mexico border. Biden made it pretty clear that he wanted to present a message of open borders, while Trump was determined to enforce tougher border control, which in turn led to a sharp decline in the number of undocumented immigrants making their way across the border during his time in power. In a 2019 Democratic presidential primary debate, President Joe Biden said that the United States is a country that tells people struggling under oppression or poor conditions, you should come, arguing that there needed to be a more open policy on asylum seekers. And more recently, the House voted 228 to 197 to provide permanent legal status for at least 2 million undocumented immigrants, also known as Dreamers, who were brought to the United States as children. This all comes right as the numbers of people attempted to cross the border into the US surges, with many calling it a crisis, while Biden's administration continued to call it a challenge. A challenge that it seems America just wasn't prepared for. The number of people attempting to cross the border is at a record 20-year high, and it seems that it's a problem that many are saying may spiral out of control. In another side that it seems that we're not necessarily talking about as much is the rise of human traffickers who are profiting from the spike. According to reports, human traffickers earned as much as $14 million a day last month as they got more people across the US-Mexico border. This would often mean putting children's lives in danger, forcing these individuals to carry drugs and other illegal items across the border in exchange for their help. Some individuals even being indebted to these human traffickers and are often forced into low-paying work or even sex work in order to pay their traffickers back. This may not just be a challenge, but it may indeed be a huge problem, as it is set to strain the US economy, and there have been calls by numerous leaders across states on the border, like Texas, to tighten the reins as they face greater mounting pressure. Pressure that it seems that Biden is also feeling. In an interview that he did with ABC News, he was asked about the crisis. When asked about whether or not he thinks that it may have been a mistake not to anticipate the surge, he responded by saying that this idea that the people are saying that they should come because Joe Biden is a nice guy is ultimately incorrect. Biden stated that the adults are in fact being sent back, and went on to say, what do we then do with unaccompanied children that cross the border? A rhetorical question of which he answered himself, essentially by criticizing Trump's administration, saying, do we repeat what Trump did, take them away from their parents and then hold them in cells? Well, it might look like he was doing what politicians do best, and it may look like he was in fact lying, as it's actually been reported that over 14,000 children are currently in US custody unaccompanied, with many of them stuck in jail-like facilities for longer than the 72 hours allowed under the US law, as it becomes more and more difficult to house them, something that Biden implied that he was not going to do, but is in fact happening right under his administration. He was then asked the question we were all waiting for. It's going to take some time, the reporter asked, to get these policies in place again, referring to the policies to create greater control over the border. Do you have to say quite clearly, don't come? And Biden responded, yes, I can say quite clearly, don't come. And while we're in the process of getting set up, and it's not going to take a whole lot of time, is to be able to apply for asylum in place. So don't leave your town or city or community. We're going to make sure we have facilities in those cities and towns run by DHS. And in short, he spoke about creating a system where people can apply for asylum from where they are in order for the US to see if they qualify. Now, of course, this all sounds like a decent plan, but that is not necessarily what is happening. Let's call a spade a spade. The doubling down is happening because, as with many politicians, he knows now that he can't just make promises that could essentially have impact on his current citizens, his current economy, and the current communities, then just think that there wouldn't be any form of consequences. It was indeed a great message, and perhaps one that was great in order to secure votes. But when push comes to shove, there are real things that have to be considered from all angles, including the ones that people don't necessarily want to think about or speak about. But as always, please do let me know your thoughts. Is Uncle Biden revealing that he's just like every other politician, talking the talk to get the vote, then doing something completely different? Is he perhaps leading America to a humanitarian and economic crisis? Or is he just trying to do what people are suggesting Trump didn't do, which is looking after the most vulnerable? Leave me a comment below, and of course, we'll be reading and making sure we keep up with the conversation. As I always say, this is never a monologue. This is always a conversation. And with that, I'd like to thank you once again for joining me and for tuning into Watchman News right here on the Watchman News YouTube channel. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell button so you're notified every single time we post a brand new video. Thank you so much again once again, and I'll see you again next time.